Today, medical science recognizes that some folks aren't helped by relaxing exercises. In cases of difficult tension and nervous apprehension, doctors are now prescribing medicine.
Jeff's losing control of himself.
We just drink this and you'll be fast asleep in no time.
For decades, pharmaceutical companies have sought innovative and sometimes humorous ways to promote their miracle cures. But today, the selling has become as sophisticated as the science. The promotion of blockbusters Prozac, Paxil and Zoloft has caused antidepressant sales to skyrocket, generating a $20 billion market.
I am diagnosed with panic disorder, and if I can do this and get up and become somebody else and make a difference in the world, so can you.
While many have been helped, there's a growing global controversy that benefits have been overblown and rare but potentially deadly side effects played down.
The dramatic and severe symptoms that led to my daughter's suicide manifested only after she started taking antidepressant drugs.
These drugs are being prescribed like candy. They're being given for practically everything, it seems, today.
Leading psychiatrist David Healy is a strong supporter of medicines for those in genuine need, but he's rocked the scientific establishment with accusations that aggressive drug marketing is creating need, blurring the boundaries between medical conditions and ordinary life.
Now, there are scientific, political and ethical issues involved here, but in psychiatry there's of course one more issue. The very way you understand yourself is involved here.
Paxil, also known as Arapax and Seroxat, became the world's top-selling antidepressant only after its manufacturer started advertising a little-known condition called social anxiety disorder.
People with social anxiety disorder consider themselves extremely shy, uncomfortable meeting new people, uncomfortable being in situations where they may have to present themselves, like speaking in public, doing anything when other people are watching and there's the potential for you to say or do something to embarrass yourself.
As with the other antidepressants, almost all the key clinical trials of Paxil have been funded by the pharmaceutical industry. A paid consultant to 17 drug companies, including GlaxoSmithKline, the makers of Paxil, Murray Steen has worked on the main trials of the drug for social anxiety disorder.
People will choose jobs where they get to interact as little as possible with other people. So we see people with social anxiety disorder really accommodating the illness by becoming, librarians, accountants, computer programmers.
I was never originally like this. I was always a really outgoing person, liked to be the center of attention. Things started happening in my life. I lost one of my best friends, which is when I first started having panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And as the stress got worse, the panic attacks and the anxiety got worse. And as the stress went away, the panic attacks didn't go away.
Social anxiety disorder is, to me, it meant the fact that I just really could not work with the public without being quite nervous or quite anxious.
Good morning, everybody.
I have a hard time, even to this day, going to social functions.
Sure,
I was unemployed, and I found myself getting really nervous and agitated at job interviews. I would stutter when I spoke. Typing was difficult, and it seemed like every time I went on another interview, it got worse, and it got worse, and it got worse. Then I saw the commercials, and I thought, well, maybe this might help me.
Paxil, the only medication proven effective for social anxiety disorder, works to correct
I started seeing the ads on TV for Paxil, and the ads summed up just what I was feeling.
What it is. what it feels like.
One ad that really stood out for me was a gentleman that went out to a dinner party, I believe, and it showed it from his perspective, and everyone was looking at him, and I mean, you just got this vibe from this commercial, and that's exactly how I felt.
We know what social anxiety can feel like, and Paxil can help.
It took me a couple of months to get the guts to call the doctor. I went for an appointment and I explained to him what was going on, and before I even asked about Paxil, he suggested it to me.
I just walked into the physician's office and said, I think I have social anxiety disorder, and I heard of this medication called Paxil on television, and I'd like to try it. And he went ahead and filled the prescription. I pretty much diagnosed myself. He did not ask me any questions. He just filled the prescription that I wanted.
Paxil is non-habit forming.
I'm not bogged down by worry anymore. I feel like me again.
I did a study in doctors' offices, and what I found was if a patient had come in and they'd asked for an advertised medicine, 3/4 of the time they walked out of the doctor's office with a prescription for that specific brand.
These days, it's not just drugs that are branded, it's also the diseases that go with them.
The thing is, the butterfly is one type of an image. The hummingbird is actually...
Vince Parry's firm designs advertising campaigns for drug companies, helping draw public attention to the latest disorders, a job he describes as condition branding.
It's a little bit overused.
Condition branding really creates new ideas about illnesses and conditions that are embraced by both patients and physicians.
So what's the idea behind the bridge structure then?
The bridge is a metaphor, so it's...
While drug companies might call it disease awareness raising, Parry's notion of branding a condition suggests industry might sometimes influence the very way conditions are being defined.
You need to create an idea, or you need to own an idea about the condition itself and the best way to define the condition. You need to own an idea about who that person is, how that patient or that profile of that individual manifests itself in the population.
Look at Fred. His feet are cold. His hands are hot. And Fred wishes he were someplace else. Diagnosis? Stage fright.
In the past, jitters, stage fright, inability to feel comfortable in a crowd, these were normally called shyness or extreme shyness or diffidence or other words. Most recently, and it's what we call social anxiety disorder.
Shyness is a very common personality trait. If you ask people in the general population, you ask 100 people, are you shy? About 1/3 of people will describe themselves that way. Social anxiety disorder can be thought of in some ways as being a real extreme of shyness. So if you took those 33 people out of 100 who said that I'm shy, probably 2 or 3 or 4 of those people would actually have shyness that interferes with their lives to the point that we'd say they have social anxiety disorder.
While there are differing views about how many people are affected by these conditions, companies will sometimes choose to promote the highest estimates. The maker of Paxil has claimed 1 in 8 people suffer from social anxiety disorder, which adds up to over 30 million Americans.
There is no sharp dividing line between somebody who has social anxiety disorder and somebody who has social anxiety and fears that really aren't something we'd want to diagnose. Fact of the matter is people are really going to vote with their feet whether or not they feel that this diagnosis fits for them, this is a problem for them in their lives, and it's something they want help with.
When we show the 3 different ideas and expose the people to them, what's the basic type of reactions we want to get out of this? What's the face inside the bottle, so to speak, when they're doing this?
Parry's firm has advised several big drug companies, and though he hasn't worked on Paxil or social anxiety disorder, he sees it as a good example of branding a condition.
With something like Paxil and social anxiety disorder, they own the idea about personal empowerment, more of a control over your own life. Beyond the ingredients of the product or the way it works, these are the ways that these brands impact these patients and therefore they can identify them. It creates an inextricable bond with them.
The Paxil alleviated a lot of the social anxiety type feelings and the panic attacks, and to a certain point it made it a lot better.
Paxil alleviated my anxiety. It did help me. I did, as a matter of fact, get a job just about 2.5 months after starting taking the medication.
John, you're so sad lately. Remember how he used to laugh all the time?
If you look at the way the drugs are advertised on television, you get a lot of very normal life situations being presented. The impression that you have is that these are treatments for everyday problems, for sadness, for anxiety that people are encountering in their normal lives. And it's a shift from a drug that's approved to treat actually people who are suffering from an illness to the idea that you just take a pill to deal with normal life situations.
You know, your worst fears, the what ifs, and I can't control it, and I'm always worrying about it.
It's like I never get a chance to relax. The problem with these adverts is they're not showing you people who are severely ill who really do need treatment, who we can all agree need treatment. They're showing us people who look rather like us on a bad day.
A long-time consultant to the pharmaceutical industry, psychiatrist David Healy now travels the world speaking out about the potential risks of these heavily marketed medicines.
Dr. David Healy is a world-renowned expert on antidepressant drugs, and he joins me in the studio. Thanks for coming in.
Hi. Thank you very much for having me. I actually use drugs to treat people who've got problems with their nerves. I used them when they came out first, and I use them still. And GPs prescribe them in good faith because they think these things are really harmless.
Yes.
When in actual fact, they aren't.
Like many others, he's concerned that a decade of mass marketing has transformed once rare conditions into modern epidemics.
Scale of the problem. I think the figures probably point to 40 to 50 million people per year worldwide being on these pills.
So I usually take my Paxil in the evening. I have to take one out. Since I'm only taking 10 milligrams, I just snap them in half. And then I take my Paxil.
Okay, we all set? We got the place all locked up?
With sales peaking at more than $3 billion a year for GSK, Paxil became one of its biggest money spinners. But for Deb, the price of a prescription is barely affordable.
Here we go. When I need Paxil and I can't afford it, my husband and I will drive down to Mexico, where we can get a supply of Paxil without a prescription for approximately 50% less than what you pay for in the United States.
In the US, rising prices and growing use have caused national spending on pharmaceuticals to double in just 6 years, and thousands of patients are forced to cross borders to buy cheaper medicines.
Viagra, $4 a pill, guys. Come on, folks.
We're like popcorns in a movie theater.
Health systems around the world are in crisis over exploding drug costs, and some nations now spend more on medicines than they do on doctors.
I've stopped taking Paxil in the last 4.5 years, I'd say about 5 times. And it wasn't really voluntarily. It was because I couldn't either afford it or couldn't get a prescription refilled.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Can I help you, ma'am?
Hola.
It was when Deborah stopped taking Paxil that she discovered a far more serious problem than the drug's cost.
The problem started when my prescription ran out, and I went around 10 days, and I was totally not functioning at all. It was horrible.
She's gone through withdrawals, I'd say 4 or 5 times, and it's really stressful. She gets really irritable. She can't eat. She just is very difficult to be around. Any little thing sets her off.
When I decided to try to get off Paxil, that's when the reality of, oh my God, I'm hooked on this stuff really came about. I was in actual physical pain from these zaps. I mean, they just go through your whole body, and It's not only the zaps and getting sick, it just feels like all the panic attacks that you've missed from taking the drug are now bottling out of you like at an uncontrollable rate. The day after I started getting sick, I actually went on the internet. I did a search on Paxil and withdrawals, and all these people were describing what I went through to a T.
You have these sudden electrical jolts.
Electric shock sensation.
I couldn't walk.
Incredibly fatigued.
I could hardly talk.
I used to get the shakes. Pins and needles.
Extreme vertigo.
Violent dizzy spills.
I fainted a couple of times. Chest pains.
I couldn't sleep.
Stomach spasms.
Migraine headaches.
The nervousness.
Racing thoughts.
Anxiety attacks. Heightened emotional sensitivity.
Crying spells.
I was very angry.
I got the impression that I could create harm.
Good afternoon.
The Paxil lawsuits started about 2.5 years ago. We filed them in August of 2001. And within days, we had to shut down our office and put everybody on phones because we had thousands and thousands of people contacting us.
And were you warned of its addictiveness?
The LA law firm Baum Headland alleges GlaxoSmithKline failed to warn doctors and consumers that Paxil can cause withdrawal symptoms and dependence in some patients, though GSK is strongly defending the action.
We continue to get calls over the last 2 years. We've had over 10,000 people call us now, and all of them complaining of the same things. I'd started taking this drug. I had no idea that I could become addicted to it, and now I'm addicted.
I decided to join the lawsuit because GSK has been telling people that it's just not addictive. To me, it's so much worse than what I originally went on the drug for.
I don't want anybody to ever go through what I've gone through, and I haven't found a doctor or anybody that can tell me how to stop taking this medication without having to go through major withdrawal.
Not everyone suffers withdrawal symptoms, and there is debate about how commonly they occur. For some, like Harry and Deb, the problem can be so severe they're unable to stop at all.
And we really don't know, either in the case of people who are depressed or people who've got social anxiety disorder, what's going to happen to you when you go on these drugs long term. What's going to happen to you when some months or some years up the road you actually try to halt this drug. Paxil is the drug that has got the highest number of reports to the World Health Organization of withdrawal from any drug ever.
Paxil is non-habit forming, non-habit forming, non-habit forming.
I don't feel bogged down with worry anymore. I feel like me again.
While advertisements are the most visible form of marketing, there are other far more subtle strategies.
Sonia Burkett suffered from uncontrollable worry and anxiety.
This is a Paxil video news release made for GSK. They're sent to local TV stations and feature medical experts, patients, and copy suggestions for the local reporters to read, all to be packaged as a breaking medical news story.
In the case of the Paxil news release, it's very misleading in terms of looking like news when in fact it's a form of advertising.
Paxil helps me with the anxiety, the worry.
You get the impression that you're getting an interview with a patient and with a psychiatrist. You don't get any information about whether there were any financial links between the manufacturer of this product and the people who are being interviewed.
The expert featured is Jack Gorman, a psychiatrist who speaks and consults for many drug companies.
Paxil underwent extensive testing for patients with generalized anxiety disorder, and it proves to be an effective and well-tolerated medication.
The good news is that the FDA has just approved Paxil to treat GAD.
With Paxil, you have now, I don't know how many indications. It's indicated to treat depression, generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and you start wondering, where will it all end?
I started taking Paxil for symptoms of PMS.
Obsessive compulsive disorder.
Acute panic disorder.
General anxiety.
Panic attacks.
Anxiety.
Social anxiety disorder.
Clinical depression. Depression.
Obsessive compulsive.
I started feeling sad.
It really isn't clear that these are all different illnesses. It's clear there's a problem, but what suits the pharmaceutical companies is to break the problem up so that it looks like it's different illnesses, and then to focus selling different drugs for each little bit of the problem.
That time of the month, nothing ever fit.
Think it's PMS? Think again.
A condition isn't even thought of, for example, and researchers will be doing work and discover a completely unknown condition. So you'd want to brand that condition to draw attention to it, that it even exists.
Donna Byrne suffers from a condition called premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMDD. The symptoms?
Mood swings, irritability, anxiety, tension, depression.
With PMDD especially, you have to wonder also about the ill for every pill syndrome. Any woman who's within her reproductive years has hormonal mood swings. That's part of normal life.
Think it's PMS. It could be PMDD.
I guess the whole process in which this became a separate psychiatric disorder, you have to wonder whether that would have occurred in the same way if you didn't actually have the marketing opportunity to sell drugs for that specific disease.
PMDD is not even listed in the International Manual of Diseases as a separate disorder and is not well recognised in Europe. Even in the US, it only attracted widespread attention after Eli Lilly won approval from the regulators to market their drug for the condition.
There's a disorder called PMDD, and the drugs that are best suited for this are a certain kind of antidepressant, the most notable one being Prozac. But women who have severe depression around their periods don't want to be thought of as taking an antidepressant. So the company that manufactured Prozac, Eli Lilly and Company, repackaged the drug under the brand name Serafem.
Serafem, the first and only prescription medication for PMDD.
The name Serafem has a soothing, reassuring quality to it, which is what they were looking for. And they dyed the pill purple because that was a color that was very appealing to women. And even the advertising that was done to support it, the women weren't spooky women who looked depressed. The advertising featured women who were confident, self-assured, were unafraid of asking for help, and recognizing that this is a condition they shouldn't feel ashamed of.
One of the first steps in raising awareness about a new condition is building a consensus within the medical community about what the disease is and how best to treat it.
Would you like some information on fluoxetine, Paxil-CR?
You have to foster the interaction between patients and thought leaders, people that lead the debate about these conditions. And what happens is that a lot of times this lead is taken by the pharmaceutical companies themselves.
The pharmaceutical industry sponsors more than 300,000 medical meetings and conferences every year in the United States alone. These meetings bring together doctors, company reps and consumers who attend company-sponsored sessions featuring many thought leaders like psychiatrist Jack Gorman.
The serotonin. Physicians attend conferences where there be speeches given, and the presentations that are put together by the thought leaders are worked in conjunction with medical societies, the pharmaceutical companies themselves, the researchers at those companies, so that physicians are actually taught what their role is in understanding the condition and how they should really approach it.
What the marketing departments are up to is trying to create consumers. But in this case, the consumers they're trying to create are physicians like me. They're trying to get us to think a particular way. They're trying to get us to see the illnesses that we will then see in you, and the sales of their product will then follow. Physicians miss that ultimately they're the consumers, but there's this weird market here because I consume by putting pills in your mouth, and you're the one who's going to have to suffer the consequences of things if they go wrong.
The drugs that we're most likely to use nowadays to treat anxiety disorders are, of course, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors.
One of the theories routinely presented at medical conferences is that mood and anxiety disorders are caused by a chemical imbalance that can be fixed with antidepressants like Paxil and Zoloft, called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, or SSRIs.
We believe that many of the anxiety disorders involve some imbalance. It's not exactly clear what the imbalance would be or exactly what parts of the brain would be involved. And if you change levels of serotonin in the brain, you really can affect things like mood and anxiety.
Healy believes differently.
There's no evidence that there's a lowering of serotonin or a clear chemical imbalance in anyone who's got nervous problems. That's not to say that there aren't things that may be biologically wrong and things that in due course need to be put right. And the only reason you hear about this now is because it's wonderful marketing copy. It's the kind of thing that a GP can use when they're trying to persuade a person to have pills. It sounds like they're saying, take vitamin serotonin. It sounds like if your serotonin system's too low, well, you really almost have a moral duty to put it right.
Despite the scientific uncertainty about the role of serotonin, for many people these medications bring great success, and conferences offer an opportunity to share experiences.
My panic disorder and my anxiety got to me so much, it overwhelmed me. But working closely with my psychiatrist, who I'd see once a week, taking the medication she prescribed, and I slowly began to regain the control that I had lost.
I allowed fear to dominate my life, and I do believe that the medication that I was on was necessary because it helped alleviate the symptoms enough so that I could understand and comprehend and make those lifestyle adjustments.
There are millions of Americans every year who are diagnosed with anxiety. We are normal people. We just have a little slight chemical imbalance, and it can be controlled. My name is Amy Verderosa, and about 2 months ago I became Miss Orlando.
Ladies and gentlemen, please meet Miss Orlando, Amy Verderosa.
My platform is I Care, which stands for Conquering Anxiety Through Research and Education. And I've also have a vested interest in this because I am a former sufferer of panic disorder myself. I've been on Paxil for the past 3 years. I'm still on Paxil, the same prescription, same dosage. Now we've faded out the cognitive behavioral therapy. One day I hope to also fade out the medication. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure talking to you. I think as the years have progressed, we've made so many developments with technology, but the number one important thing is to accept it and have community support and awareness of this disease.
Patient support groups like Freedom from Fear now play a big role in raising awareness about anxiety and depression, advocating both drug and behaviour therapies.
Yeah, if you could do that, because I'll call
because of my own struggle with anxiety disorders and depression. I wanted to give back something and help people who were suffering like me. So I started a support group.
So I spoke with the PR company.
Okay. You know, one of the things that I found when you're reaching consumers is you have to have a good tagline. You have to give them a quick message, raises their curiosity and interest, and says, wow, that could be me.
Freedom from Fear, like many patient groups, receives funding from pharmaceutical companies and works closely with the industry PR firms.
A large amount of our money does come from pharmaceutical companies, and I think it is the responsibility of a pharmaceutical company to be generous and supportive to advocacy groups and to trust them to get out the message that is important to their constituents.
How long do you have to stay here till?
One of Freedom from Fear's major activities is each year running what's called National Anxiety Disorder Screening Day. We do a lot of promotion, and we get a lot of attention.
For instance, it's very common with anxiety disorders to have sleep disturbance. People have a lot.
Through its network with hundreds of locations across America, Freedom from Fear promotes screening days where people can learn about anxiety disorders and depression. Then get a free screening to see if they or a loved one could be suffering from any of these illnesses.
The area that has been most ripe for condition branding has been anxiety and mood disorders. And the reason for that is very basic. There isn't a blood test you can take. There isn't a number or a statistic that you can measure. A lot of the scales are really cognitive scales, meaning scales that result from asking a series of questions and getting a series of answers. And there's no accepted understanding of exactly what that is.
People are distressed and unhappy and awkward and nervous, and they fill up a rating scale that actually maps out a little bit of their distress and nervousness. But this isn't proof that you actually have the problem, and it's certainly not proof that you should be treated for the problem.
But if all else fails, take an antidepressant. After I overcame all of those things, I said, why wouldn't anybody really want to take some drugs if it could help them to overcome that terrible life?
Mood disorders, while they're not life-threatening in many instances, still have a tremendous effect on the quality of life. So the research that's being funded by the pharmaceutical companies is really expanding the idea about the benefits of therapy beyond just protecting or saving your life into improving the quality of your life, making life a lot more enjoyable and livable. And that's definitely changing the idea about the way we think about what a condition is versus, the previously accepted notion it's got to be something that's life-threatening.
If you've got a very severe problem, and I treat you with a pill like Paxil or whatever, I may save your life, I may save your marriage, I may save your career. But if you don't have that, if you've got a very mild problem, then simply making you a psychiatric patient poses much more risks than leaving you untreated.
My daughter, Caitlin Elizabeth McIntosh, was a beautiful, bright child, had a pretty typical childhood, no real major problems. And then 6th grade came along. The older kids picked on her. She was too tall. She didn't quite fit in. At the same time, she was having trouble sleeping.
A school counsellor who saw Caitlin at the time was worried she may be having thoughts of self-harm and suggested she see a doctor.
The doctor talked to her, decided she was depressed, and gave her Paxil. After about a week, it was obvious it was not working. Her mood just deteriorated. She was despondent. She was just like a zombie. So we took her to a counselor who suggested a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist put her on Zoloft. After that, it just got dramatically worse.
Our daughter Julie had been going through what one friend described as a rough patch. She was going through normal teenage issues, things that affect girls and boys a lot of times at that age. And we had gone through an agency that was recommended to us through our local school district. And they had given her an evaluation and said that she was experiencing depression. As part of this clinic, they prescribed Zoloft for Julie.
I gave it to her. I filled the prescription for her. She didn't want to go to the clinic, and I said, Julie, it's probably a good thing. Just talk out your problems and get it over with.
The counselor said these drugs and these antidepressants and Zoloft are very safe, they're very mild, very effective. And the prescribing information we received about the Zoloft said the same thing. None of the mental health professionals we dealt with had informed us and let us know that there were problems associated with these drugs and things we should have been looking for.
She became suicidal, thinking about throwing herself out of second-story windows all the time. She would put her head down on her desk and doze off during class and then wake up in the middle of a dream where she was lying in a puddle of blood. Before, she was just a despondent 6th grader trying to adjust to school. Boom, a week later, they said she was majorly depressed with psychotic features.
Following the Paxil and then the Zoloft, doctors next prescribed Caitlin a combination of tranquilizers and antipsychotic drugs.
They wouldn't listen, that she was just a normal kid that needed, attention. All they could see was a bunch of symptoms and they had a list of drugs that could treat those symptoms. January 5th, 2000, she went to school and went to the girls' bathroom during second period and hung herself with her shoelaces from the hook on the back of the door's bathroom.
Julie had been taking the pills for 7 days, and on the 7th day, she took her life by hanging.
She went into the garage when we were out for 2 hours, and that's where she was found the next day. I remember all these things so clearly. Sometimes I gotta sleep with my head on the clothes. I can smell her all night.
That drug prompted her to take her life. I believe that was the only variable, that was the only thing that was different during that period of time, was the drug.
While there's no doubt in the minds of the parents, no coroner's inquiry has investigated the girl's state of health or the potential role of antidepressants in either suicide.
With any medicine that a person will take, there's a balance of how likely it is to make them feel better or to cure whatever problem that they have versus what's the likelihood that they might actually be harmed. And when you're giving drugs to healthy people, you shift that balance so that if you're already healthy, the likelihood of benefit becomes much, much smaller. And then there's a concern that actually what are we doing at a population level? Are we causing much more harm than benefit?
I think what's happening is we're not just picking up people who were ill and need to be treated. We've gone way, way beyond that and are actually making people ill.
With any individual case of suicide, direct causes are often not clear. But one explanation for how these drugs might increase the risk of suicidal behaviour is through an adverse reaction known as akathisia.
We also know now that Julie was experiencing akathisia. She was responding badly to the drugs that were in her system. She was showing agitation. She was pacing, things that were taking place that we didn't connect and didn't put together until after it was too late.
Now we know, in studying the literature, she had akathisia. She had that severe inner agitation, and she described it as such. She says, I just, no, I can't sit still. I'm so nervous. I can't stay in my own skin. I've got to get away. And that inner state of agitation can lead to suicide.
How do you decide, both as a clinician and also theoretically, whether or not someone really needs a drug and who doesn't really need a drug? And is that really a meaningful distinction?
My big concern is this. We may do good, but I'm also sure, knowing my track record, which I don't think is any worse than anyone else's, that we can do harm. And if that's the case, we need to let people know what the harm could be. We need to recruit them on side so that they can play a part in trying to make sure that the harm's less likely to happen.
As an expert witness in key court cases, David Healy has had unprecedented access to GSK archives. It was there he found evidence showing Paxil not only caused withdrawal problems, but was also linked to a small increased risk of suicidal behaviour in depressed children.
I want to ask the question of what kind of society have we become when increasingly, it seems, pharmaceutical companies can get drugs on the market for children which haven't been shown to work and which have been claimed to be safe and effective when they aren't.
Healy's findings of a potential link between Paxil and suicide-related behaviour in children were later confirmed by drug regulators in the UK.
The regulators in the UK have had the opportunity for the first time to see the clinical trials done with the SSRI group of drugs. And what they've found is that, just as I had seen in the GSK archives, that in most of the clinical trials that were done in children who were depressed, the evidence is that the drug didn't work at all.
British regulators went on to find that with most SSRI antidepressants, except Prozac, there was a potential link with suicide-related behaviour in depressed children, and no evidence of benefit. While Zoloft manufacturer Pfizer rejects those findings, GSK has publicly admitted the problem.
Well, there is no doubting that many kids are depressed, but are drug companies taking risks with their health? That question is at the center of a landmark lawsuit against the makers of Paxil.
The New York State Attorney General is suing GlaxoSmithKline, the makers of Paxil, for fraud on the grounds that they conducted 5 studies of the drug on children and adolescents, but only publicized one, the favorable one.
Once you start putting out studies, the positive study in this case, you've got to release the other studies, negative or not, so that doctors have a complete picture and they can make the appropriate prescribing decision.
GSK says it has acted responsibly and rejects the allegations of fraud.
The pharmaceutical companies have concealed the evidence where the clinical trials don't suit their pill. But even worse again, you get clinical trials which appear in some of the principal journals in the field which claim the drug is safe and very, very effective. But when you get to see the raw data, you find, in actual fact, this isn't the case at all.
That belief leads Healy to contend that until the company's raw data are available to independent public scrutiny, marketing will continue to corrode science.
Everybody says, well, look, the adverts, that's the marketing. The clinical trial, that's the science. But in actual fact, we've now come to the point where it's actually the clinical trial that's the marketing.
At the same time as trying to overcome withdrawal, Harry's experienced other serious problems as well.
The Paxil started to cause really bad depression. One night, it got so bad that I ate a bottle of sleeping pills in hopes that I wouldn't wake back up.
He's joining many others who are travelling to Washington for an official public hearing about SSRI antidepressants.
I want them to, at the very least, put adequate warnings in the commercials or on the bottles, something to let people know what they're in for. If they have to take the drug, then they shouldn't be misled into what it's going to actually do.
Can you grab those extra suitcases for us?
We didn't know very much, if anything, at all about antidepressants when we first got started with this. But now we've learned a great deal about it. These drug companies are some of the most profitable companies in the world. And these drugs are some of their most profitable drugs. So there are huge economic forces in place here.
I really think that it is a mass marketing campaign of these pharmaceutical companies that win over the minds of the doctors to believe the paradigm of taking a behavior and calling it a disease and then coming out with a drug to treat it. And there's a whole bunch of people that are on these psychotropic drugs now that just have behaviors that come out of normal life experiences, and instead of getting a chance to work them through and have counseling, they're immediately medicalized and given a drug.
Caitlin dies. I go to a psychologist because I'm grieving, and that psychologist who heard the story, who knew what happened to Caitlin, still tried to put me on antidepressants. I mean, it blows, it absolutely blows my mind.
I've just got to go and tell Caitlin's story because I'm really afraid that they're not going to do much but just give us lip service. But we'll see. I know other parents are going, and maybe if enough of us testify, it might make a difference.
Good morning, and welcome to this joint session. One of our goals today is for this meeting to be conducted in a fair and open way where every participant is listened to carefully and treated with dignity, courtesy, and respect.
The US drug regulator, FDA, has convened a large committee of advisors to examine the suspected link between suicidal behaviour in children with depression and the SSRI antidepressants. Many believe these drugs can prevent suicide, but for others, like the families who've come to testify, the experience has been dramatically different.
I'd like to introduce you to my daughter, Caitlin Elizabeth McIntosh. Well, it's actually only a two-dimensional image of her, but it's all I have left. She died of suicide at age 12 years, 3 months, just 8 weeks after being put on Paxil and then Zoloft.
Our daughter Julie had been excited about college and had scored 1,300 in her SATs several weeks before her death. Instead of picking out colleges with our daughter, my wife and I had to pick out a cemetery plot for her. Instead of looking forward to visiting Julie at school, we now visit her grave.
On September 9, 2001, in a state of confusion and hopelessness, I put a .38 Special Smith & Wesson revolver under my chin and pulled the trigger.
I went from being a shy and mildly depressed but never suicidal kid to being overcome with thoughts of hurting and killing myself while on the SSRI drugs, thoughts which I acted on.
3 weeks later, he pulled his car into an old factory garage, started his engine in there, waited until he died of carbon monoxide poisoning.
He told me, "I cannot stand the way this drug makes me feel." 2 days later, he committed suicide.
On December the 5th, 2000, I discovered Jacob's body hanging from the rafter in our attic. He had hung himself with his own belt.
6 weeks after I was put on the drug, I stayed home from school, wrote my goodbye letters, and swallowed a cup full of poisonous bathroom cleaner.
She stabbed herself twice in the chest with a large chef's knife.
How do you erase the picture of your child trying to run in front of a moving car?
She hung herself on the evening of November 11th in her bedroom.
Matt hung himself from a bedroom closet hook, barely higher than he was tall.
She grew extremely violent toward us. She would run to the silverware drawer, get a knife, and attempt to stab herself.
Would you people put your children on this drug? Would you take it yourselves?
I am a parent. It is my right to make an informed decision on behalf of my daughter. You did not allow me to make that informed decision. Please, have respect for our children. Make sure that you put proper warnings on these medications.
After a morning of public hearings, the committee reconvened, and debate moved to whether these incidents were caused by the underlying disease or due to some kind of stimulation syndrome activated by the drug.
I'm most impressed from what we heard in the public hearing this morning about the stimulant syndrome and the number of individuals who had demonstrated psychoses, akathisia, mania, agitation, and so on.
I think that myself and other people around the table have a reasonable suspicion that there is a subgroup of children who are developing idiosyncratic reaction to SSRIs and could possibly lead to violent behavior, including self-harm.
If there's a view that this syndrome is so well described and does exist, put together the case. Again, the problem here has been that the events we're looking at are part and parcel of the disease.
Some of the family stories this morning were not of kids who were feeling down. They were of kids who acted suicidally because of impulsivity and not because of suicidal symptomatology that had been ongoing.
Those cases.
The extent to which the drugs or the disease cause suicidal behaviour is the subject of ongoing debate and investigations. But by the end of the day, a consensus had emerged to take urgent action.
If I heard nothing from this morning's testimony, I heard repeatedly that people feel the need for patients and family to have more information than they have currently.
And when we're dealing with a drug with no apparent benefit, it seems to me that any risk becomes incredibly important.
A lot of the people who spoke this morning, the picture that was presented of their child or someone they knew was not someone who was very, very ill. It was someone who had relatively minor type findings, who were put on these drugs with terrible consequences. And I think I agree with every speaker who said that something needs to be done to educate practitioners and the public that these things may not at all be benign. And I think that warning needs to go out in the very strongest terms, from the agency as soon as possible.
For the families for whom warnings did not come soon enough, it's back to everyday life.
We're going to try to reach out to as many people as we can, tell our story, and try to spread the word so people can make informed decisions. If they think there's some value with these drugs, so be it. But go in with your eyes open, understanding what the downside is, because the downside could be very great.
I think what we're calling mental illness and mental disorders today are just part of a continuum of human behavior, a continuum of personality types, a continuum of temperaments. Anybody who's outside that norm is now labeled with some disorder. If you look back through history, Mozart, Beethoven, Einstein, any of the great artists and scientists would all have been labeled with ADHD or some other darn thing. They all would have been put on drugs, and we probably wouldn't have a lot of the great things we have today.
What I see repeatedly is people who are going along to their GP who are under stress, who are maybe a little bit unhappy, and if they don't smile on the way in the door to the GP, there's a real risk they're going to go out the door with a script for an antidepressant. And in the process, it's not just people being labeled as being ill. What's happening here much more is we're changing the experience of what it means to be human.
To learn more about the program you've just watched or to share your thoughts, visit www.linktv.org.
After World War II, billions of dollars were raised in the name of the Holocaust victims. Sadly, only some of the money was given to the survivors. Now, 60 years later, many are asking, where did the money go?
ניצולי השואה שתקו, סבלו, הם כבר לא שותקים. הם כבר לא שותקים והם לא ישתקו.
Watch the U.S. television premiere of In the Name of the Victims, Sunday, December 9th, 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. On the LINKTV series, Doc the View, eye-opening documentary premieres from around the world.
Elder women from traditional cultures around the world united in 2004 with a common vision to be a healing force for the earth. Last year, the grandmothers and the pioneers came together for a shared purpose, turning prayer into action.
Watch a special sneak preview of Turning Prayer into Action, Friday, December 21st, midnight Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific. Also on Saturday, December 22nd, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific.
This is LINKTV, your connection to the world.
What are you giving this holiday season? Is it this? Or this? Or maybe this? This year, why not make a change? And give your friends and family the world. Now it's easy and meaningful to give the gift of LINKTV. Just go to linktv.org or call 1-866-485-8848 to honor those you care about with a tax-deductible gift in their name to LINKTV. Choose from one of 3 designs and have a personalized holiday card sent to everyone on your list, letting your loved ones know you've made them official sponsors of Television Without Borders. This holiday season, remember peace on Earth is possible when we see the world without borders. Happy holidays from LINKTV, and don't forget to send your card today.
The U.S. dollar takes a nosedive. Ripples are felt across the world. Will the euro be the solution? Next, on Global Pulse. A comparison of how broadcasters worldwide are covering this story.
The weakening dollar has been the subject of much wailing and gnashing of teeth in recent months.
A look at the euro's continued dramatic climb against the U.S. dollar.
The Chinese yuan broke the 7.45 mark against the U.S. dollar on Wednesday.
Statements like these are being made in the media across the globe as the value of the U.S. dollar decreases. Al Jazeera English explains how this affects the U.S. economy and economies worldwide.
The American shopper's spending amounts to 2/3 of all U.S. economic activity. If the shopping slows down, that's not just a problem for U.S. retailers, but a problem for the whole world. U.S. consumption equals about 20% of global demand. Manufacturers worldwide rely on it. And with the world economy where the dollar is still the most important global currency, millions will continue to watch the markets anxiously, wondering if the buck will stop here or continue its slide.
As China's Asia Today and Korea's KBS News report, many believe moving to the euro could be the answer.
If the dollar drops by 10%, it will put $5 billion at risk for Korea's international accounts. The situation seems to be getting worse, and experts are urging the Korean government to come up with solutions. To minimize the loss of big companies from the sinking dollar, they need to try to change their accounting from U.S. dollars to a stronger currency like the euro. But the good news is that higher prices for oil and raw materials are easier to solve when the dollar exchange rate falls.
Indian jewelry exporters in northwestern Rajasthan are incurring heavy losses as the U.S. dollar depreciates against the rupee.
Directly or indirectly, when America is slow, all the rest of the world becomes slow.
The euro will be better because it seems more stable.
But even with the strength of the euro, some European businesses are suffering, as France's TV5 and Germany's Deutsche Welle report.
The Eurozone's currency has never been this strong. In the past 3 months, the euro has continued to climb, nudging $1.50 at the weekend.
It would be good if the dollar could regain its strength.
The
mirror bra has been a thriving part of the French market for 2 centuries. 40 salaried workers, 100% local production, and a space in the luxury hotel market. The company was thriving, but these products are manufactured in euros. Its competitors sell in dollars. The green bills are worth much less than the European currency. The consequence is that the French mirrors are markedly more expensive. This small company has already lost business.
The dollar's decline affects politics and oil, as Mexico's Once Noticias reports.
Hugo Chavez and Mahmoud Ahmadinejad met in Tehran to sign new cooperation agreements. Both agree and are insisting on enforcing the proposal to abandon the use of the dollar presented at the OPEC meeting.
Soon we won't talk about dollars. Look, the dollar is shrinking, and is shrinking the dollar empire and the U.S. empire with it.
But the dollar's decline may not be so bad for European tourists and U.S. retailers, as NBC News reports.
Airlines like Virgin actually advertise 3-day shopping blitzes in cities like New York and Boston. Bring an empty suitcase, they say, and you'll fill it.
We are like crazy shopping.
And shopping is the mission, not sightseeing. Some come all the way here to then take an hour bus ride to a suburban outlet mall for bargains.
I'm probably saving about £200, so about $400 compared to the price in the UK.
And a pound saved here is a dollar earned for the U.S. economy.
This is Erin Coker for Global Pulse. If you watch the news, then what you know is not enough.
An extramarital affair.
It's time to think globally with Global Pulse. You can see every episode of Global Pulse at linktv.org/globalpulse.
when you need to know what the world thinks and how it will impact you.
She shouldn't have died. This is a huge danger.
Watch Global Pulse for news and views. Thursdays at 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific. And Fridays at 7:55 Eastern, 4:55 Pacific. Global Pulse. News without borders.
And now, music television like you've never seen it before, as LINKTV brings you the best music from around the world.